Hello and welcome back to this series where it's all around belief in leadership. And I'm really excited to bring on the show today Jane McAvoy. Jane is a marketing manager for Musgraves and Lead Network Ireland co-chair chapter for the Irish network. Thank you so much for coming on, Jane. I'll let you do a little bit of an intro because you know yourself better than anyone else.
Thanks, Louise, and thanks very much for having me on. So look, as you said, I am marketing manager with Musgrave, and I've been with Musgrave for over 7 years, so a long time now, but actually in Musgrave standards, I'm a newbie. I was with another retailer for a few years before then, and I actually started my career off on the supplier side. So I was supplying into a lot of the retailers in private label. So I've kind of been around the houses. I know all sides of the business. And yeah, really delighted to be here to talk about leadership and shared belief, or borrowed
Amazing.
belief, I should say.
Borrowed belief, yeah, believing in other people when they don't yet see the belief in themselves or potential. I suppose we'll delve into it. Jane, can you describe a leader that you've had in your retail career, your career overall, that had a really positive effect, and what you learned from them?
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, look, I've been really lucky over the years to have had so many amazing leaders that I've worked with. I've four examples actually of people who just specific things, specific
Yeah.
traits that have stood out to me. So the first one actually is from Andrew Keating. So he is our Musgrave's chief financial officer, but he's also the co-chair, or sorry, the sponsor of our Gender ERG. Now, Andrew is such a busy person, but he always has time for people. And I remember asking him one day, I said, Andrew, how do you do everything? Like, how do you get to everything? And he said to me, my job is to say yes. I was like, okay. But I think what I really admire about him is that he's amazing at empowering people. So he has created a fantastic team. They're clear in their strategic direction, and then he allows his people who are the experts in their area to step up. And I think that's a really key leadership skill. The next person that I'd like to mention is Trish Blackshields. So I was lucky to have worked. I did a secondment a year ago, and I worked under Trish. So she is our interim chief commercial officer. And I don't know if you're the same, but when I listen to some of the best leaders that I've met, are amazing at asking the right questions. So they'll sit back and they just know what to ask to really just pull something apart and understand it. And Trish is incredible at that. She's so good at getting the right questions, which then help take something that's really, really complex and chunk it down into very kind of manageable things that you can then action. The next example is my director, Desi Derby, and he is amazing at giving a really clear brief. And I think sometimes we we underestimate the importance of being clear in our brief, or actually investing the time to do a brief. And I think it's one, it levels the playing field. So actually everybody is clear. Like, do you want an essay or do you want 2 lines on this? Do you want it in an hour or do you want it in 2 weeks? And I think it's such an important skill to learn, and it is a skill, and it's definitely worth investing in. And then I'm going to finish up on with my co-chair, Sarah Ferguson. So she is amazing at managing difficult conversations. Now, I think it's really important to add to this that managing a difficult conversation, you need to, and she is a very authentic leader. She builds trust with people. So when she's going into that conversation, it's from a place of trust, and they know that she's coming from the right perspective. But she will listen very empathetically to somebody, to understand where they're coming from, so that almost in a coaching style, they come round to understand where she's coming from and why it matters, why what we're doing matters. So it's a real skill to bring people on that journey. And yeah, she's incredible at it. And I think the best way to learn that skill is by observing and watching people like her in action.
I love that. I love that. And some really good nuggets there. I think asking great questions, which is what you mentioned, one of your leaders, which is again around not giving people the answer, but
Yeah.
giving them space to find out the answer for themselves. And I think there's a big difference between giving direction and feedback and coaching. And coaching is really asking those great questions, like you said. So that person has that aha moment, that penny drop moment within themselves, and they can self-reflect and give them the space. And I think I've seen that in leaders as well. You mentioned another leader, they've an open door policy. So yeah, I'm going to say yes to those people because I know they need that support and I have your back. I think that's a really, really great one. And it's interesting you said around delivering clear and concise information or doing a brief in a really clear and concise way, because anyone that knows anything about, delivering information or reports, it's a lot harder to say it in a smaller than it is in a bigger piece. Yeah. So anyone that's done any college assignments or anything or written reports, getting that down to maybe 300 or 400 words is a lot harder than doing the pages and the reams of paper, And it's interesting because we all like to receive communication in a different way. And I know I've worked with people in the past where they go, Louise, top line, just give me 3 bullet points. And then I could go down the hallway to somebody else and they'd say, tell me about what you have for breakfast this morning. How's your kids? How's your dog? So they want the whole shebang. They want a really long interaction. Yeah. Whereas the other person up the other corridor is looking for the bullet points and they're gone. Yeah. So I think it's very important we look at engagement and again, leadership, that they understand that. And I love the last one. I'm just going to touch on that again because I was listening to you very, very intently there for the last couple of minutes, which was around that difficult conversation piece. And that was the biggest challenge for me in my journey, Jane. The biggest challenge, I touched about it in my TED talk, but that was a big, big part. And a lot of the work I do is around how do you have those conversations, because they have to happen. I think a lot of people they progress, they'll get a promotion in a company, but nobody sits down with them and explains these things. It's not until it happens, when you're really up against it, the wall, that you realize, God, I don't really have the skills to do this. Because you can read all the literature in the world, but you really need someone to, I would say, almost role play that out, let you talk about what the worst case scenario would look like when you go into that conversation and you say to someone, you, like you said there, you trust, and being authentic and people knowing where they stand with you. And I think a lot of that with leadership comes back to expectations, so are we clear what Jane expects of us? I'm working underneath her. This is what I have to deliver on it. And when that isn't clear, that's when maybe as a leader, we're not communicating that clear enough for the team to understand what's expected and what we want from them from a deliverable in the role. And that's not only task driven, it's also behavioral driven. If we're in a meeting or if problems and challenges come, do we really look at it from a negative piece, and is that bringing an impact to the rest of the team and their mood? Or are we looking at it from a positive piece? Are we looking at it from a support piece? Are we looking at it from being curious and open-minded? So those couple of examples you've gave are really powerful, Jane. I think anyone listening that has gone through those journeys of ups and downs will go, geez, those are amazing people you have around you. Different things, which is fantastic, because I think sometimes we look at people and we think that they have to have all of that. And I think we look at our collective group around us in the workplace or outside, those networks of people we lean into, that they have different qualities and traits that help us learn and grow as a leader and an individual. Thank you for sharing that. That was amazing. Retail, as we know, I was in it for 14 years. Jeekers, the stories I have, I'm not even going to go into them today. Some people listening will have been on the journey with me and they'll know, but it's a fun environment. It's challenging at times. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of, and you'll know this, Jane, for the work that you do and from being in the sector, I suppose, there's a lot of there's a high turnover at the moment in different retailers. Um, what do you feel is needed now for retail leadership teams to really thrive, I suppose? Do you feel is needed?
Um, I suppose in terms of leadership teams, I think it's a very challenging environment, right? It's
Yeah,
so
yeah,
fast paced,
yeah,
a
definitely.
lot of reactivity. And I really admire leadership teams who are confident and patient.
Yeah.
So I think, they've gotten the right insight, they've the right data,
Mm,
they're confident, right? We know our vision, we have our strategy to deliver that
mm,
vision, our team around us are clear in terms of how we're going to get there.
mm.
But then having the patience to allow that to happen,
Yeah,
which isn't the easiest, right? Because again,
yeah,
the industry's so fast paced, you're constantly making sure that you're on budget, ahead of budget. I think a good example is in luxury retail, Burberry. So if you go back to the early noughties, Burberry was everywhere, absolutely everywhere. And it was just knockoffs everywhere. And it had gotten to the point where nobody wanted to wear it. You wouldn't buy an expensive Burberry piece because the brand had been cheapened because they'd done so many licensing pieces and really lost the core of who they are.
yeah,
And then it was Angela Ahrendts went in and she turned the business around. She um, focused on their core things like their trench, what they were famous for, took back control of the brand, focused on digital innovation. So, like live streaming their fashion shows, personalized shopping, their store experience, etc. Loads of different things. But the reality was, it took a decade to turn that brand around and to get it back to being highly profitable again and a real luxury brand that people wanted to buy into and invest in. So yeah, for me, that kind of confidence and patience to believe in what you're doing and that you're doing the right thing. So of course, you're going to have to pivot as you go in that journey. You need to be
mm.
agile, but still staying the course because you know that you have the right course that you're on.
Yeah, I love that. And you can sometimes, I was listening to something recently, and they said sometimes we don't wait long enough to see the results of what we want because we can maybe chop and change
Yeah.
and we don't stay on it. So that kind of staying on that course and riding that wave, when you're not seeing the results as quick as you would like, that's where that patience piece, I think, really dips in, doesn't it? Because maybe if we waited those few more weeks to really see that lift or to see that turnaround on whatever it is we're doing, that maybe that it just needed a little bit more time, to get to that point. Yeah, that's really, really good. And I think it's something that definitely anyone that works in retail, it is so fast paced and you're working in that environment that sometimes that patience piece, it's like you're pushing it up a hill, at times. Yeah.
Easier
Um,
said than done, the Louise, though. Again, back
yeah,
to the pace, right? And
yeah,
it is a
100%.
reality, but
Yeah.
I think that's a good example, and there are lots of others.
Yeah.
So
Really
yeah.
good example. Love that example of Burberry. And I actually remember where it was everywhere. Literally everywhere. um, yeah. So if you could, so there's a lot of people listening to this, and obviously you've come up against this as well, Jane, where you've maybe had a friend or someone in work who has been promoted to a new manager position or they're in a leadership role. What advice would you give them on their journey? Would there be any tips you'd give them, or something like that you would say, Jeekers, like, I'm just letting you know now, if it was me, this is what I'd want to be looking out for, knowing, yeah.
Um, yeah, sure. I think first things first, back to I suppose the Andrew example, trust and empower your people. But
Yeah.
also I would say let them work how they want to work. So, of course, We have certain meetings we have to attend. We have certain things that we need to do. And look, we're very, very lucky that in Musgrave, we work in a hybrid environment. So we do 2 days either with customers or in the office, and then the rest is from home. And so outside of the kind of core things that we, I suppose, have to do as part of our business operations, then allowing people to be themselves. So some people like to work really early in the morning. Some people like to work late in the evening, but then they might want to go for a run in the middle of the day. And actually that makes them so much more productive for the rest of the day than if you had said, no, you have to sit at your desk regardless, because you're within one of those specific hours. And the reality is we're all different. We're all very, very different. So pushing somebody into something that is not going to help them to excel, I don't think is the right way to work. And I found that by working in this way, that people are happier and they're doing much better work. So that's something that's key for me. I think also recognizing that good management is a two-way relationship.
Yeah.
I think sometimes as managers, we show up and we feel like, well, you're here to do this job and you're getting paid to do this job and that's your job and that should be it. But actually, if you step back, if you invest in them, they're so much more committed to what they're doing. They're so much more bought into what they're doing. And all of that time and energy that you give them, whether that's on career development and actually genuinely caring about their career development, not thinking about the short term of, you know, you're doing this role. It's actually, okay, well, what's next? And how do we get you there? What are the gaps there to get you to that point? And again, when you do that genuinely, one, I find personally a huge sense of satisfaction when somebody who's worked with me has progressed, but also people do better work because they're stepping out of their comfort zones, they're challenging themselves, and they're believing in themselves. Because again, back to that borrowed belief, you're showing them that you feel they have the potential to get to that next step. Now you're being realistic and you're saying, you know, we've A, B, and C to work on, but you're showing that they have the potential, and then they start to believe it, and then it starts to happen. And then I mentioned before about the importance of clear direction, that what, when, but I'd like to maybe just go into a little bit more about the why. And I think the importance of the why, and this really matters to me. I mean, at the end of the day, we're humans, right? We're not machines. And, you know, so much talk around purpose and people dropping out from corporate life. So we all want to feel that what we're doing has an impact. And that can come from something very small, right? So an example of that during COVID, our customer was food service and they shut their businesses. But actually, my team knowing the impact that we were having, the impact that the offers we were giving them, the communication, we were so intentional about every word we used to make sure that it actually was right for them and that we were supporting them. So we all want to feel that our work has an impact. And I think sometimes it's the small things. It's actually what we're doing. What are we doing in our day to day? And how is that impacting our customers? You know, what are their pain points? How are we making their lives better? I'm very customer centric in my approach. And I think helping the team to understand why we're doing things, what impact it has, and then looking at the results on the back of it, looking at some of the insight as to what our customers are saying about us. And that matters because often that information gets fed back to leadership teams, but it doesn't go beyond that level. And often I find personally a huge sense of satisfaction, and my team do as well, when we go through that process. And we're so much more bought into what we're doing and more passionate about what we're doing as a result.
I love that.
Finally, very important one is listen. I think we're, especially in retail, right? It's so
Mm.
busy. Again, we've spoken about it being fast paced, and we don't stop. We just keep running, running, running. But actually, sometimes people are not in a good place. And if you don't stop and listen both to what they're saying, but also observing their body language, how they're behaving, are they okay? You know, people could be dealing with sick parent, just baby not sleeping, or do you know what, Louise? It could be as simple as my chair in my office is really uncomfortable and it's making my life miserable. And that might be such a tiny thing, but actually, if you listen to that person and if you genuinely care about them, all that stuff will come out as you're talking to them. And those small things can make a big difference. You know, not being worried about having to go to a hospital appointment or ask for the time, knowing that that will be fine. And then I find when you behave in that way, that people just do great work, and they show up in the right way because it's a two-way relationship.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's something I think probably that we assume that everyone does it when they go into that
Yeah.
role, and I think I don't, hand on heart, Jane, I think majority of people that don't do it, I don't think it's an intentional, I don't care about people. I think genuinely they get so overwhelmed on their workload and their task load that that becomes a priority focus. And then what becomes secondary is what you said there, is those checking in things, is the, how was your weekend? Is that, this kind of
Mm,
just temperature gauge to see where they're at, which I think is that really, I think from a work perspective, you get more done because they're actually there and they're invested and they want to be
yeah.
there. And they'll be more engaged. So yeah, and I think it's an interesting one because a lot of what you're talking about there, between feedback, customers giving it to your team, between you talking about getting to know your team and getting to know, looking at their body language and their observables and all of that. And there's a lot of what you're saying, it's emotional intelligence, and it's really lovely to hear it, outside of the buzzword emotional intelligence. But those are all of those self-awareness things, Jane, and it's lovely to hear. And I think sometimes, because we're talking about this as an advice piece for a new manager going in, I think sometimes I think you need to, at the beginning in that role, you might think because you got that position in the company that it's about the workload. It's actually not. It's about the people. And it's about, if you go in there with the mindset of, I need to build trust, I want to get to know these people, I want to see what their reason is for getting out of bed in the morning. And I remember any place I used to start working in, the first question I'd ask them, I go, what makes you excited to go in here? Like, why do you bother even coming into this company? Like, what's the payout? Like, what gives you energy? And it's so interesting when you hear other people's reason or motivational factors of why they're actually in the role. And then you start to get a really good picture of them and their personality, because they tell you, well,
Yeah.
this is why, well, you know what, Louise, I want to go traveling for the next few years and I'm in this and I want to do as best as I can. I want to go on and do this. And that's really interesting. But it gives you a really good idea to the person behind the
Mm,
title and behind the role. And I think that's a place where we all probably need to spend time at, when we go into a new position, or even if we're growing our team, that we spend time within that. It's probably something that we don't factor into our day. If we look at our calendars now, they're probably filled with meetings and stuff. We probably need to maybe look at that, because sometimes it can get pushed to the wayside, if we don't make it a
yeah.
priority. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. You're totally right though, Louise. It's not like, when you kind of come to that next level, it's not
yeah,
about what you do, it's the way you do it.
yes,
So whether that's with your team or whether that's with a wider team and your cross-functional colleagues, it's how you show up is just so much more important. And we'll talk in a minute, but even those tools and skills to know how to do that, because it doesn't
yeah,
just come intuitively, but actually it can be learned. Everything can be learned. So if you want to
yeah.
do it, you can do it.
Yeah, believing in others is something that I'm a huge fan of, and it's something that stemmed from my career in retail and something that I would say definitely got me out of bed in the morning. At times where I probably didn't want to get out of bed, I wanted to get back in again, uh, and it's something I think it's something you don't need a title for, you don't
Yeah.
need a salary, you don't need because it's something that you do for other human beings, other people around you, because it genuinely makes you feel like you're showing up in the world and maybe giving that kindness and that that sense of love, I suppose, to other people, in a meaningful way. Um, how important do you think that is as leaders? Because obviously it's open to perception. Okay, so I'm aware that I think it's believing in others is a gift, but maybe it shows up differently for other people in their lives. So I love to always see what words or what meaning people attach to other things, because I think, look, we're fascinating creatures, but it's also it's interesting for me to see, where it showed up for maybe you, Jane, in if you were believing in people in your career at times, maybe where you didn't have the belief in yourself, or maybe you helped others, on the flip side, that maybe didn't believe in themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, look, as I said before, I think it's a really important theme, that borrowed belief, because I can definitely identify with the last decade. I really struggled with my self-belief, even more than confidence. I could get up in
Mm.
front of a room and speak, but actually, we spoke before, Louise, about the importance of believing in yourself.
Yeah.
I use the analogy of the surgeon. You wouldn't let a surgeon who you didn't believed in themselves to carry out the operation to cut you open, right? So
Yeah.
why would, for example, your managing director give you X amount of money to run with a plan if he didn't believe you believed in yourself? And it's funny, it's so subconscious, that
Yeah.
self-belief, but so important. I was really lucky in my career. So when I joined Musgrave, I was probably only a couple of months in. Catherine Lamb became my mentor. So at the time, she was HR director in Musgrave Wholesale Partners. And she has continued to be my mentor. So Catherine now for the last few years has been leading out over in Musgrave, España, and doing an amazing job. But we've continued that relationship. So whether it's kind of every couple of months on Teams, we'll meet in person occasionally, sometimes it's a WhatsApp, but really through the good and the bad, and really the bad, right? So that's points where you're really struggling, where things aren't going as you planned, or you're just kind of stuck. Having somebody there who they see something in you that you don't see, or that you're not able to see at that point, right? And they're willing to stick with you, and they're willing to give you their time, even when you know how busy they are. And you kind of go, well, do you know what? There's something again subconsciously where it's like, well, actually, if she's willing to do that, there must be something. There must be something. So even if I'm not seeing it, I'm really struggling, that she's seeing, and I need to get to that point where I also see it and I also believe it. But I think I've also been lucky at a company level. So during that period, Musgrave also got me coaching. So I've been working with the amazing Mary T. I don't know if you know Mary T, but she's fantastic. And I've worked with her for the last couple of years. And Musgrave also sponsored last year. I wanted to do a course in executive leadership with Cambridge on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, I work in marketing, so technically, this has nothing to do with my day job, but they know how passionate I am about that area, how curious I am in terms of driving the industry forward, driving Musgrave forward in that area. And they backed me, So again, backing me, believing in me that this is the right area to study. When Eileen Biggs asked me to be co-chair of Lead Network, yes, of course, I'd done a huge amount in that space and I was very passionate, but it was totally unexpected when she asked me. And again, it's that she must have believed that I could do it to ask me. Even when I was asked first, there was this whole, we talk about it, imposter syndrome, whatever. I didn't believe in myself, right? So that's the way I would put it. But then you grow to believe in yourself. And I've been so lucky again. I mentioned before Sarah Ferguson, like we've worked together probably almost 2 years now, because we didn't launch till November of 23, but we had been working together in advance. And like, she's just incredible. And to be able to work alongside her has, like, it's been a gift. It really has. And, even small things like Sarah might say to me, stop saying sorry. That was a really good point. Stop saying sorry. And it's really small stuff. But then you go, actually, why am I apologizing? But it's that belief again that she showed in me to invest that time in me. And it really does matter, because we all go through those points in our life where we struggle with thinking that we're good enough. And then you eventually come to that point. So if those people keep their patience and stay the course, you do eventually come to that point where you're like, I am good enough, not perfect, but I am good enough.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I think it's and I can remember back to a time where I used to apologize a lot. I don't know, is it a cultural thing in Ireland? We say sorry every 2 minutes. But it's an interesting one, because I think it goes back to, our feelings create our thoughts, create our words create our actions, and our actions create our habits and our beliefs and our values. So I think if we look at our outer dialogue, it's probably an insight into our inner dialogue. You know what I mean? So I would always see some people that would maybe, it's quite interesting in the workplace, Jane, that would be maybe very angry. And I would say that anger is inside. So you send love, you send kindness to them, because I think whatever is going on outside, we can see that's an indication of what's happening inside. And it's an interesting one. We look at kind of belief and how it shows up. And, there's I don't know, is it a female thing? It probably is, that we're probably apologizing sometimes for being that person in the room that has an opinion or that has a lot to say. I think sometimes we don't need to do it. We can just be that person and show up and just be, applauded for speaking up at times. So thanks for I suppose sharing. You've so many great stories, Jane, around your own leadership story, and I think for someone to share that much shows how much you've evolved in your own journey to have that, I suppose, that reflective piece, and to be able to look back and to pinpoint different things shows a real, I suppose, learning of you and how you've grown. And you can see that from the way you describe things. What do you think are the qualities you think will be needed right now in retail where it's at? We talked about trust, we talked about mentorship. Is there anything else you'd add to that mix, I suppose?
Yeah. Look, there are loads of traits
Yeah.
that matter when it comes to leadership. Having the vision, we
Mm,
spoke about communication,
yeah.
authenticity. I think humility is important.
Oh, I love that.
Being a good collaborator,
Mm,
adaptable, resilient, because things will go wrong. So it's how you react to that, coming back stronger. But actually, Louise, it's probably um, what leadership isn't, and especially as women looking, and not just women,
mm,
actually, people who maybe don't fit that picture, I suppose, of what leadership is. Leadership is not a specific gender. It's
mm,
not somebody from a specific socioeconomic background. It's not somebody who's neurotypical.
mm,
And leadership can show up in so many ways. So I would ask that people challenge their concept of what leadership looks like. But I'd also ask senior leaders and HR professionals to, the next time they have a role that's up, please don't look at who's in the role now. That we want somebody, because they've done a great job. We want somebody
mm,
who, whether we believe it or not, looks like them, sounds like them, thinks like them, more importantly, and acts like them.
mm,
Instead, step back and say, okay, So that person's done an amazing job. But actually, if we want to propel ourselves in the next 3 to 5 years, who's the person who's going to ask the difficult questions? Who's the person who's going to challenge us, who's going to be completely customer centric and get us to that next level? And it doesn't have to look like who was in the role before. So yeah, that would be my.
I love that. And I love the fact that you've touched on that. And I think sometimes we can promote people internally, Jane, because they know the business and it's going to be an easier transition for us. Right. And sometimes they promote them because they're really good at their job here. But that doesn't always translate in deliverables in the job that we're moving them into here. And it
Yeah.
doesn't always mean that because they're really super exceeding here, it's going to fit what we want here. And we think because of their performance here, it's going to translate over to here. And I think that's where I see a lot of shortcomings that, I've seen through the years where people are moved into different higher roles, Jane, because of the work they're performing in the role they're in. But that to me, fair enough, there's a commitment, there's all of that, and they're delivering, but it's not the same expectation. So why then are we saying, well, if they meet this expectation, then surely they are to meet this? That's
Yeah.
not reality, unfortunately. And I think exactly what you said, what is it we want from that role, and take all of the personality, relationships, emotion out of it, right? And just look at it really, really logically and go, what is it we really want to grow the company? I think that's a great way of looking at it. And uh, I think definitely something that, we talk about in psychology a little bit, that familiarity. So when you go into a room, we actually, and it's a bias actually, but we do it
Yeah.
without realizing it, Jane, that we align ourselves to people that are similar to us because there's a security and less of a threat there. Psychological safety we talk about. It's more psychologically safe. We'll be prone to, and it's really interesting. I've done psychometric assessments in the past, and I remember the first time we done it was many years ago. I was working for a company, Jane, and they done it with the senior leadership team. And I remember being in the room, and the facilitator at the time said, oh, I can see all of it was disc they used at the time. They said we could see all the yellow people in the room. And there was a group of about 15 of us at the corner of the coffee machine, and we wouldn't stop talking to one another, right? And and there, it was so interesting, like,
Yeah.
because I'm going, this facilitator has already pinpointed how we should, because we're so drawn to people that are similar. And going back to what you said there, to be very mindful of that in the workplace, because that will hinder growth. Because if we have everyone thinking like us, acting like us, talking like us, well, then that's not very inclusive and diverse. We're really narrowing that down, and we're not really opening it up to others. Yeah. So it's a really, really good point you've made. I'm going to ask you, and I love asking this, it's one of my favorite questions. If your team were to describe you as a leader, what type of leader would they describe you as, and why?
Gosh, this is the cringe one,
Oh
Louise.
no, this has been a fun one, because I've asked a couple of people, and Duncan Graham, who's the sales director for Hidden Hearing, he had a few funny ones that's going to be going out soon. But yeah, there's some interesting ones. So I'm dying to hear yours now, Jane.
No, I mean, look, I I'd like to think that they
Yeah,
feel that I care about them and their career development, that I push them to progress and learn new skills,
yeah,
but that along with pushing them, I'm supporting them to make sure that they succeed. So it's not kind of go and ball.
yeah,
It's right. How do we make you success? But I would say, like I said, I think that, and I would like to think that because that's what I focus on.
yeah,
Um, but also I do that because I get one, I get joy out of that. As I said
yeah,
before, I love to see people develop. I love to see people going from here to here, and also the team do the best work. So
yeah,
everybody, I said before, that rising tide floats all boats. If they do great work, I look great. Vice versa, right? So we all
mm,
win. So Yeah, that's what I hope they say about me. But I think just genuinely that I care, right? So
Yeah.
that I'm coming from a good place and that I want them to do their best work for our team.
I love that. And it comes through. It comes through, Jane, your love of learning and your support in developing others. You can see it in how you're describing different things. So there's no surprises there. So the lead network is something that you're part of and you're co-chair of. Can you maybe describe? It's been a great network. It's a great support to you. Um, how's it helped others and yourself, I suppose?
Yeah, of course, Louise. Look, I suppose just a quick segue to tell you what Lead Network is.
Yes.
So we are a network. There are over 23,000 people across Europe who are part of Lead Network, all retail and FMCG. So it is industry specific, and I think that's a huge advantage. So I mentioned earlier about, some examples that you can share.
Yeah.
They're relatable examples, and I think that's what's
Yeah.
great about being part of Lead Network. And if I'm to say, like our mantra is doing, not trying. So it's a very, very practical approach. So, sometimes when you're part of a network, it's people going into rooms and mingling with people they know and they used to work with before. But this is very, very different. It's set up in a way that we're sharing things that worked. I know we have a HR roundtable, and one of the biggest things that they said they got from it is having that network of other senior HR leaders to lean on. So we don't talk about anything that is, around pricing or whatever. So it's a safe environment to operate in, but having those people around you, and even at an international level, I had a question that I needed to ask somebody who was in a similar business in across Europe. And it was just great. I had that connection. I could go straight away out to that CRM and ask the question. I've had a few other people. So that's a huge, huge advantage. Actually, it's invaluable. But then aside from that, Lead is very much focused on the tools, those practical tools. So Sarah and I are focused on the structural and the personal barriers. In terms of the personal barriers, we have 2 virtual events and 2 in-person events. So last year, our virtual events were around building self confidence and belief and personal branding, which is so important. And this year, we're looking at both LinkedIn, and we're also looking at mentorship. And we will have 2 in-person events as well. And in those in-person events, I suppose we ask thought-provoking questions. We get professionals from outside of our industry. And I think we spoke before about, like, our industry, a lot of people they go from one company to another,
Yeah.
and it can become groupthink. So actually taking a similar topic from people who are outside of the industry, it just can get us to look at it from a different angle, and challenge our perspectives. And also we set you up for success, right? So if we're going to ask you to network, we're going to deliberately and intentionally split you up. We'll give you a lanyard that'll be a specific color, and you will be split up from the group you come in with, which feels really uncomfortable. We'll give you questions, and we will set you up almost in a speed dating way to network. But the amount of success out of that, you, Louise, have been at our events, you feel the buzz in the room. Because when you set people up for success, and when you take away that I guess that awkwardness and that fear, it just happens. Like, the network just grows and people just learn from each other. Mentoring, Louise, is such an important part in terms of advancing leadership and promoting gender equity in our industry. So last year, we had a pilot mentorship program, and we had 14 mentors and mentees. Very happy to share that one of those mentees has recently been promoted. And we have almost 60 people this year going into our mentorship program, which is
Wow.
huge. So to double it this year is fantastic. I mentioned our HR policy roundtables. So they
Yeah.
are releasing two playbooks this year. So those
Wow.
industry playbooks are, so the first one is on menopause and andropause and the right policies around that. And they're very much focused on best practice, but put in a good, better, best format. So it doesn't matter
Mm.
where you're at in terms of your DE&I journey, that'll be of use to you. And look, for us, this is how do we help those companies, those, especially those maybe independent retailers who don't have
Yeah.
an in-house resource to,
Yeah.
right, I want to do something in the morning. What can I do? Okay, we'll do this thing. At least that will get you on the journey.
Yeah.
So there are lots of things that we're doing in 2025. I'm going to share our calendar, and it would be amazing if you wouldn't mind sharing it in the notes with this podcast.
Will do.
But being part of Lead Network has just been transformative, and
Mm.
it's free. So if you want to Google the Lead Network, become a member, you can sign up
Mm.
for free and join us at our next events. Get involved and push yourself out of your comfort zone because it will have an impact.
Amazing. And I can 100% vouch for that. And anyone that I'm outside of Lead and I attended as an attendee, and it's open for everyone. And I think that's what's really fantastic. So from people that are in industry to people that are maybe that are I'm not in I look, I was in retail for a very long time and I love being around other retailers because they're just absolutely fantastic people to be around, and you're always learning and evolving. So definitely it's worth attending. It's definitely worth attending. And it's a very welcoming group, I would say, as well. So for people that are maybe nervous, I suppose, Jane, for going, definitely worth reaching out to one of the guys in Lead. I don't mind if they want to reach out to me. I'll be going to some of them. Sometimes it's, I think, having a friendly face to go and to say hello to. So I think that's important because sometimes when you are used to being in a work environment where you're around familiar faces, the scary thing, I think, Jane, is going somewhere on your own and going, geez, am I going to have anyone to sit beside? Am I going to be going to the coffee machine on my own? How am I going to strike up a conversation? And for some people it's easier than others, and I 100% get that. So if and I think that's important as well to know. And yourself, Jane, you're a very approachable person. You're very easy to talk to, so then I suppose people can talk to you when they go to the events as well, or introduce themselves to you, which is fantastic. Definitely worth attending. Jane, if people want to reach out to you at any point, what's the best way they can contact you, I suppose?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. So
Yes,
private message
LinkedIn.
me on LinkedIn,
Yes.
connect with me,
Yeah.
private message me. And
Yeah.
look, you made a really good point there, Louise, in terms
Yeah.
of it being a very open and welcoming environment.
Yeah.
I am one of those people who has gone to events and like literally hidden the toilets until somebody I knew came along. I feel that pain. But if I can do it in that environment, in terms of the way we've set it up in Lead, then anyone can do it.
Mm.
So please reach out to me. Please get involved and just take that first step, as I've said before, because sometimes we
Mm.
procrastinate to the point of just not jumping off that ledge. And the worst that can happen is you need to get back up again and start
Yeah.
again. But it's I just encourage everybody to just take a chance, lean into the network around you, ask questions and listen.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jane. Thanks for your time today. It's been amazing to have you on. And yeah, look forward to everyone listening to this. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.